What's going on, everybody? Drew Sanford here with the Bass Fishing Underground podcast. We've got a special guest here today, Randy Blaukat, and we are excited to have him. We've suckered him in. This is our first podcast that we're doing, so I was able to at least sucker somebody that knows what they're doing in here with me today to keep the bar held high.
Well, I feel honored to be the first guest, man. That's exciting.
Thank you. Yeah. Randy, you've been in this industry a long time. How many years have you been a pro fisherman?
Since actually the fall of 1985 was my first season with bass. I fished, it was actually back then it was the old Redmans, they're BFLs now. I fished that for a couple years before that. So since 1985, basically.
Gotcha. When did you graduate high school?
1980.
So 1980. So you came out of school, fished the BFLs, Redmans at the time. Mm-hmm. What was the next step up from Redman?
I was in school. I was going to college at the time, so I was fishing a lot of the buddy tournaments, that type of stuff, and the old Redman tournaments. And after I qualified for the All-American in 1984, and after I got a taste of what that was like, it's like, man, I want to do this, and I wanted to do it for a long time, but I spent the next year and a half working just odd jobs, doing what I can to save up enough money to fish the Bassmaster Invitationals. Because back then, that's all there was. There was just 6 invitationals. That was the pro circuit. There wasn't anything else.
Wow, yeah.
And that's how all the Bassmaster Classic qualifiers came from. So, I saved up something like $3,000. Which bankrolled me for the year. It was only
you were hood rich.
Yeah, it was only $600. I was still living in my mom and dad's basement, so it was only $600 entry at the time.
Yeah.
Got real fortunate, qualified for the Bassmaster Classic my rookie year, and that sort of just set the stage.
How did the points work back then?
Back then it was a combination of points and pounds. It's like you could qualify either or. So I think that I got in on points that first year, and they took the top 35, and I finished 33rd, so I barely squeaked in. It was so funny. We were at Lake Chickamauga the last day of the season down there, and I was on the bubble for making it, and I was watching the weights. I was in the last flight, and a couple buddies of mine said, "Man, you're going to have 3.5 pounds to make it." And I only had 3 fish, and they were all 12 inchers. All 3 of them.
We've all been there. Maybe not to make the classic,
yeah.
But
and I knew that I needed all 3 of them, and I had one of them in there that it would touch one in second and wouldn't touch the next second, and I went ahead and went through with it, and the guy put it on the bump board like that, didn't even look at it twice, wound up barely squeaking. And if that fish hadn't measured, I wouldn't have made it. Probably would not have stayed in the sport, because I was broke, and it was just sort of meant to be.
One 12-inch bass.
Yeah, that was the most important one I caught. I remember I caught it on a Rapala minnow out on the main lake hump in Lake Chickamauga. I'll never forget that, off a grass bed out there. So
that's cool. Yeah. That's really, really cool. Well, fast forward now, 20, how many years? 25, 28 years?
Man, 30.
30? Oh, man, I can't do
30,
math.
Yeah,
30 years.
33 years.
I was trying to spot you a couple is what I'm trying to do.
33 years.
So, a lot's been said and talked about, and we don't need to rehash MLF, FLW, BASS, all that type of stuff. But you were one of the guys that made a switch and said, I'm going to go a different direction. Mm-hmm. But you also put a lot of effort into your podcast and some of the other things. And I think the fishing industry, I own a boat dealership, we own a tackle store, we're pretty heavily involved in the industry. It's really interesting watching some of these anglers that, the marketing's evolving, there's advertising, and then there's marketing, and how people put money in, as owners, how they put money in, or investors in businesses, how they put money in towards anglers, things like that. And to me, it's so intriguing, the YouTube world, the Facebook social media stuff like that, and which anglers, Brandon Polinick, heavily going in on the social media side, things like that. And you've kind of gone that route. Talk a little bit about your thought process. What was your thought process? I mean, you fished the tour since it started. Yeah. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, since 1986. I fished bass for 20 years and made 9 classics, 9 Forest Wood Cups, and in 2005, that's when the Elite Series started. And all of us that were fishing in the top Elite 50 series at the time, we got an invitation to fish the Elite Series. Mm-hmm. And I turned the invitation down in 2005 because there was a sponsor conflict. I was sponsored by Fujifilm through FLW, and they had a deal in there. Part of my contract is you couldn't advertise beer or tobacco. And part of the deal with the Bassmaster Elite Series is they were sponsored by Bush, so you had to have a Bush sticker. So I either had to lose my biggest sponsor, which was close to a 6-figure deal, or drop them completely and just go fish the Elite Series. So I had no choice. I had to stay with FLW. Biggest mistake of my life, because FLW started going down the tubes the very next year. Bass started going uphill. But at the time, FLW was doing great. Bass was struggling. So it was one of those poor decisions that I'd made. And as a result, after I made that decision, it was a struggle with FLW just to maintain some type of presence in the industry, because we didn't get the marketing advantages that you had the Elite Series. So a lot of these guys like myself and a lot of the Bassmaster guys that were fishing bass forever that stayed with FLW, our careers took a huge hit simply because we were not marketed like the Elite Series guys were. Yeah. So it was sort of one of those deals where some guys made the right decision and fell into it. Other guys like myself sort of got, to the short end of the stick on it. Yeah.
Always a winner and a loser.
Yeah.
So there's peaks and valleys in the industry. Where are we? If you said a state of the union right now of the industry, I mean, for sponsors, for fishing, I mean, as many years as you've done this, you've seen the years that are good, you've seen the years that have struggled. Where do you think we are now? I mean, how does that pile up?
Oh man, that is such a massive question, because we've got the industry is not anything like it was 20 years ago, and it's all because of the advent of social media, and it's the advent of so many circuits to fish. I mean, basically, there are so many tours out there, there are so many circuits, there's so many anglers that are fishing the circuits, that it's not like it was back when I started out in the 80s, where there were 35 pros. Everybody that made the classic, that you could actually define who is a pro angler. But now that's a gray area, because anyone that fishes for money can be considered a pro angler. So there's really is the best circuit the Bassmaster Elites? Is it the MLFs? Is it the NFL, the new circuit?
NPFL?
Yeah, anything. Yep. So from that standpoint, we're all over the place as far as the competitive series have. But the big thing that has changed, Drew, is the fact that this whole YouTube social media thing. I'll use an example. Look at Hank Cherry. Hank, won the Bassmasters Classic the last 2 years. Hank Cherry, and obviously that's an unbelievable accomplishment.
Yeah.
Nobody can take that away from him. I'm super impressed with it. But as far as from a marketing standpoint and a business perspective, the impressions and the value that comes with Hank Cherry's win, it's not even near to what some 20-year-old kid on YouTube can do as far as exposing products to a target and a non-target market. Yep. So therefore, in my opinion, performance in bass fishing tournaments and the ability to excel in tournaments, it just doesn't have the value like it did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is due to the fact that social media just reaches more people.
Well, and it's so fast. It's ever-changing. I've said this, you look at Kevin Van Dam in 2010, 11, when he was just wrecking everything. Well, back then, videos, yes, there was Bassmaster on TV, on TV stations, but the YouTube and the different things like that wasn't that big. Right. So he wins a classic, or he wins a tour event, whatever it is. You got in the magazine, you got put on TV, so you kind of captured a time frame, a material amount of time when you do that. Fast forward to today, you can win a classic this week, and then an 8-year-old catches a 5-pounder, and they get 400,000 views on YouTube, and it goes viral. It changes so fast. And that was kind of where I was going a little while ago with that question is, it's such an interesting demographic because, owning a boat dealership, we have people come asking about sponsorship stuff all the time and things along those lines. And a lot of people that are watching are either pro level or aspiring to be pro level, things like that. And, the effort and where you put your time is to me, it's a big deal. And like you were saying on the social media content side of it, you can't compete. I think it's hard to look at it and say, well, I'm going to go catch fish. I mean, how many people actually go catch fish and really make a living doing that? And that's, bringing you on here, you've seen the evolution. At the beginning of your career in different times, that was an important thing. And then now it's completely changed. Talk a little bit about, your YouTube and your station and what you guys are doing and what you are doing and how you're trying to get ahead of that curve from that standpoint.
Well, I got into YouTube late. I only got my channel going about 1.5 years ago, simply because I'm just not tech savvy. I don't know how to do that. A lot of guys started before I did, but And when I started my channel, I had no idea how it would be received. I mean, I didn't know if anyone would be interested in it. Didn't know how successful it would be. But what I've sort of done in mine, I've just sort of tried to give everybody a feel of the reality of it, the real world, without sugarcoating anything. Mm-hmm. Because I think a lot of people respond to that. A lot of people they pick up on the polished presentation, the over promotion, trying to sell something all the time. Mm-hmm. And I just try to give guys just a down to earth, honest perspective of my viewpoint of fishing. You know, sometimes guys love it, sometimes it makes people mad, but that's just, but anytime you have an opinion, that's right.
You've got a good following. What's your follower count?
It's right at 40,000 now, close to 40,000.
On YouTube.
Yeah, on YouTube. Yeah, I got 60,000 on Facebook, so
yeah. So when you talk about a hydraulic or a hot foot versus not a hot foot, it causes ruffled feathers.
Yeah, I always say I could give you guys my grandma's chocolate chip cookie recipe, and some guys would call me an idiot for doing it. You know, that's one of the things. You know, you can't be all things to all people. I mean, you're always going to have your naysayers. You just sort of have to ignore that.
Yep. With 30, 40, 70, if you add them together, you know, whatever that number is, I'm sure you're going to get one or two.
Yeah, you definitely.
Or a lot.
You definitely do. But it's been real cool because I've gotten to the point now where I enjoy doing that more than I enjoy fishing tournaments, because you can give something back and you can help teach people, and then you get compensated for it at the same time.
Yeah.
So that gives, you know, me and a lot of guys the incentive to share these secrets that we've kept to ourselves, because so much of the stuff I share on my YouTube channel, I didn't talk about forever because I thought it was going to give me a competitive advantage. Yeah. But if you can generate more income through YouTube than you can through tournaments, you know, and help people, it all equals out, you know.
Yeah, that's very neat. It's such a cool perspective, and that's something that I think we lose, you know, just as a fan in my world, you know, as a fan of the sport. You know, you can armchair quarterback all you want, but you lose perspective and the different lens that you look through. You know, your lens of that, how you see that, a lot of people wouldn't understand. And you know, it's a neat thing to hear and hear people talk about.
Yeah, and the thing about it, man, I've done this for so long. I mean, I've been in the trenches for so many years, and I've experienced the highs and lows and everything in between. So there's a lot to share with that. I mean, it's just never ending. I mean, it's literally 40 years worth of blood, sweat, and tears. Truly, you know. Yeah.
So today, you know, we're in a, you know, the economy's doing good. Boats are selling, products are selling, things like that. What does 2 years look like? What does 4 years look like? You know, bass, you know, everybody was worried there for a little bit. You know, everything has peaks and valleys, like you were saying. FLW kind of had its heyday, and the bass had its, and you know, it's gone up and down. What do you think the next couple of years are going to look like from that standpoint?
You know, I think a lot of the tournament circuits we have now, a lot of it just depends on how long they can last as far as the funding goes. Mm-hmm. Because I mean, it costs money to run a circuit and all that type of stuff, and the way that tournament circuits are organized, every one of them has a different business model, you know, as far as what they want to achieve out of it. I'm not so much concerned about the state of the tournament circuits as I am about the fisheries sustaining those circuits, because, you know, we're getting more anglers on the water every year. The sport's getting more popular. And in order for us to have some type of a long-term sustainability from not only a business perspective in the industry like what you're in, but from a tournament perspective, from a quality of fishing standard, we have got to really ensure that we protect our fisheries, because if your fisheries are not sustainable and they're not productive and they're not quality, you're simply not going to have the interest in it. And as soon as we have a deterioration in the quality of fishing, then that's when you're going to see everything affected. You know, your business will go downhill, tournament businesses go downhill. It's to everybody's best interest to ensure that. And I think what happens a lot of time is that we get sort of a false sense of security that our lakes are doing really good, because we have so many technological advances that allow us to become so good at catching fish that I don't know if we can really put a gauge on how good the fisheries really are or aren't. Because what I always look at in a tournament situation is I don't care what it takes to win a tournament. I want to know what those pros, the bottom 25% of the list caught, because that's more in tune with reality.
Yeah.
look at Lake Fork, for example, that Bassmaster. They took 100 pounds to win it, but there were guys on there that had 12 pounds for 2 days. Elite Series guys.
Even the Classic. I mean, that's what we were sitting there blown away for. Oh, it was unbelievable. So, you're looking at it this year, and it's like, yeah, the guys that caught them, yeah. but there wasn't that many that really caught them. Yeah. And you look at fish catches and things like that, and it could be timing, it could be weather, it could be a lot of different things, but overall, it's a big factor.
Well, I think everybody needs to be aware of the fact that, you hear all these big weights in tournaments and that type of stuff. I think so much of that is created from bait technology, electronic technology. But say, for example, let's go back to Table Rock Lake in 1970, back when I first started fishing the lake. All we used back then were like plastic worms with spinners on them, big white hellbenders, and you caught 8 and 9 pounders all the time on it. If you would go to Table Rock right now with a white hellbender,
you might get a spotted bass.
Yeah, or one of those hard plastic worms with a spinner on it. Yeah, you're not going to catch nothing. And those bass have not seen those baits for 50 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Imagine if you took a Megabass jerkbait or a Kitech swim bait down there 50 years ago. So I think that we really have to be careful about, as far as protecting our fisheries becomes a number one priority from just an economic standpoint, if nothing else. There's a lot of other things attached to that too. Yeah. But once that starts to go downhill, then the whole industry suffers.
Yep. That's a very good point. So, well, let's get in. Today we're going to do an in-depth section, and what I want to do is really, really dive into something and help people out. So you were talking giving back, things like that. Kind of the premise of this podcast is, we get a lot of guys coming in and out of our shop. We have a lot of pros in the area, things like that, and I want to make sure that people know some of these secrets that you talk about and that you've learned over the years. I want to make sure our listeners get to hear some of that stuff. Today's not necessarily going to be a lure or a tech or a tip from that standpoint, but it kind of goes into what we were just talking about. But fish care, it's summertime, it's getting hot, oxygen levels are getting lower. There's a lot of different things. I run around. I like fishing the northern Toyotas or opens when I can and chasing brownfish. Yeah. You don't watch them like a hawk, they die, flat out die. And there's a lot of places that are that way. You get down in a river and you get, you're fishing shallow flats and you back up on a mud bank, suck some mud up through your bilge pump stuff. On the live well of the aerators, you kill fish. It's simple as that. I've done that. That's, you'll learn when you mess it up. Yeah. Let's talk today about, fish care, keeping them alive, doing stuff. What's kind of your go-to and how do you do it? What do you think? What's your, perspective on that?
Yeah. I mean, I've had, a pretty good record as far as when it comes to fish care, not losing fish. I've lost very few fish in my whole career, and it's pretty simple. First of all, it's like, it starts from the time you catch the fish. When you get that fish in the boat, especially in the warmer weather months. I mean, this is when we're really talking about it. The fish are a lot more sturdy in the wintertime, but anytime you're talking about post-spawn particularly, that's when they're at the weakest points, and through the summer where the oxygen levels are low. When you get that fish in the boat, keep it off the carpet. Don't do a fist pump with that fish flopping around on the boat before you put it in the live well. Try to keep it off the carpet, get it in the live well, get your aerators on manual, never put them on auto. In my opinion, there should not be an auto option on a bass boat live well. It should be manual.
Buy a bigger battery.
Yeah, buy two. I always run 2 cranking batteries all the time. Yep. I mean, I've been running 2 cranking batteries forever. Put that aerator on auto all the time. Make sure that when you make runs, you got adequate water that it didn't leak out. Take your time and slow down in rough water. Probably one of the biggest ways you kill fish is running too fast in rough water. You lose scales. Those fish, it just kills them if you run too fast in warm, rough water. I have experimented extensively with fish additives, ice, that type of stuff. I have not noticed any type of correlation that helps me out that much. Even ice. For me, it's just a manual aeration on the live well. Make sure my aerators are always pumping. Make sure they're always full of water and they don't drain out. And just pay attention to your fish. Don't put them in there and not look at them for 3 or 4 hours later. Keep an eye on them all the time. If you make a run and you've lost 5 or 6 inches of water, put that motor in reverse, back up, fill it up like that. But I'm going to guess that, in my opinion, the 3 top things are keep those fish off the carpet, keep your aerators on manual, and slow down in rough water. Yeah. So I think those are 3 big things that kill fish.
Yep. I know when we go up north, the water, the temperature deeper, when you catch a deep fish, Are you worried? You said you don't really worry about ice too much, things like that. When you catch a deep fish, do you fizz them? Do you not fizz them? Do you belly clip them? How do you keep those fish alive?
Well, I mean, I'm sort of on the fence as far as fizzing them because I've done both with that on there. I mean, I think fizzing is, if you don't know what you're doing with it, you can really hurt the fish. I mean, I know how to fizz a fish, and I'll do it if I get a deep one like that. But I think for the average angler, sometimes it's better not to fizz them. You know, if there's, they'll still live belly up, and let maybe the tournament officials take care of that because they can fizz them when they get in. But I think you're talking about a pretty small percentage of those bass that need fizzed, unless you're fishing, like I said, in certain situations up there. But if you're shown how to do it correctly and you know what you're doing with it, then yeah, I would say do it. But if you're not real confident in your technique, man,
those belly clips work great. I've used those the last couple of years, and I've even put on my cold tag. I'll take like a catfish weight, and I'll just clip it on the tip of the cat, on my cold tag, and it keeps them nose down. I mean, I try to do simple stuff like that because I fish. We live on Table Rock. You're going to catch a fish on a jigging spoon in 40, 50, 60 foot of water. Even in those, like in the Toyota series this last year, I was catching my fish in 50, 60 foot, chasing shad, and I put 2 or 3 belly clips on them, and it did. I never had an issue with the fish.
Yeah, I've never tried those.
They're awesome. Yeah. They really are. And one of my buddies that fishes the elites, that fishes in the north, he just puts weights on his actual coal systems, and it just keeps their nose down. And if you do that, then they're not flipping up on their back stuff. And I'm with you. I've got buddies that they don't do nothing. They throw the fish in there, they leave them on all day, and they don't kill fish. Yeah. So, sometimes I think we overthink it, but it's also worth having a conversation about to keep fish alive. Because like you said, if one bad tournament in an area on a lake that's marginal as it is could really put a damper on, fishing for the future. So.
Oh, yeah, definitely so. And that's why I've always been a big advocate, is try to not have very many tournaments during the post-spawn, because there's that window between like late May and like the 3rd week of June, where that's just when the bass they're weaker at that point of the year than any other time of year. So that's when a lot of the fish get killed during that period.
Yep. So let's say you're down in Alabama fishing hot summertime. What do you do?
Fish carrot?
Yep.
Well, for me, if I'm fishing shallow water, say if I'm, flipping docks or flipping laydowns in the back end like that, as long as I keep mud out of the aerators, and as long as I keep that water in fairly good condition, I usually don't have any problem with them. And that, if they're caught in the same water temperature that the live well's in. Yep. I think that if you catch some in deep water, then move to shallow water, you're going to have some problems with that. But again, I just think the main thing is just to keep that aerator on manual all the time. As long as that thing is pumping hard in there and keeping the oxygen and keeping the water circulated, unless you have a fish that's stressed out, or if it's been, if it's bleeding or something like that, I just haven't lost hardly any fish because of that. I mean,
you probably don't do it, but us mortal fishermen that pick up on it and the fish is 38 yards down the bank and they swallow the hook. What do you do in those situations? Do
I just cut the line. I don't even put any pressure on the fish to try to unhook it like that, because that's
you literally just leave it be. Just as soon as you get it,
I'll leave it be. And then sometimes if I am in a situation like that, I'll take some Mountain Dew with me and pour it in their throat. It will stop the bleed, and that will help out. Yep. But normally from what I've seen, if you lose a fish, you can tell pretty quick if you're going to lose it. I mean, there's something about sometimes if you hook a fish in the tongue just right, it's sort of a mortal wound, and they're just not going to survive it. But it's like I said, I can count, just on 2 hands how many fish that I've killed in 30 years. I mean, it's not very many at all.
Yep. All right, Randy, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
If you guys want to check out Randy's videos, post, all sorts of stuff, check him out on social media, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Intuitive Angling. Randy Blaukat, Intuitive Angler. That'll find it if you Google that most of the time or search it on those social media platforms. Check out Baitworks. Check out Boatworks. We're in Baitworks studio today, so I appreciate them letting us use the studio and stealing it for a few minutes here and talking with Randy. So, we appreciate it. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys need anything, let us know.